Welcome to a new video in my home automation playlist, and today I want to talk about a new Sonoff product, which is the Sonoff NSPanel. And I wanted to rush this video out a little bit because it is such a new model that what we are seeing here is a pre-production version, and at the moment only a Kickstarter exists on this product and not an awful lot of time left on this Kickstarter. So I wanted to get this video out. So if you think this is something that you want to invest in a Kickstarter, you still have a couple of days to apply. What you see here is a touch screen. Well, it's a 2-gang switch with a touch screen. So as you can see, there are 2 buttons here where you can control 2 lights, just like a 2-gang TX or a T1 Sonoff. And you also have a touchscreen which shows you weather information and time, and also shows you the temperature in the room. And you have 2 more screens. On one screen you have a thermostat where you can control your room temperature, and on the other screen you have a widgets where you can control 8 other Sonoff devices, or you can also trigger an automation, a manual automation. This unit which I'm holding here is an EU version, and there is also a US version which has a slightly different form factor itself. It looks a little bit more vertical, but the functionality is exactly the same. So in this video, I'm going to go through these functions, these different screens, and I'm going to show you how it works and how you configure it in the EV-Link app. And I'm going to cover a lot in this video, a lot of different topics, and also something about like future integration and maybe alternative firmwares. So I think this video is going to be quite long, so I have created the chapters for you so you can just watch the part that interests you. And before I get into the details, I want to talk about the Kickstarter itself. Because, as I said, at the time of this recording, there are 90 days left from the Kickstarter, and by the time I release the video, it's probably going to be quite a few days less. So, for some reason, Sonoff decided to release this product on a Kickstarter. Well, I'm guessing it's the Kickstarter run first, and then once the Kickstarter runs out, probably the second batch is going to be available through the usual channels. So it is really up to you to decide whether you want to be an early adopter and then go for a Kickstarter, or you just wait for the main release. And I think there are a couple of reservations against Kickstarter. I'm not a big backer. I have backed a few projects. I have backed a project which ended up badly and still didn't deliver after a couple of years. So certainly there are some risk involved with these social campaigns. But as you can see, Sonoff has already delivered a product which is already working. So just like with many other products, this Kickstarter is for the initial batch, the initial production. And I don't think that, Sonoff has any issues in terms of manufacturing or delivering a new product. They have certainly created a lot of smart devices already. And even though this is their first product which includes a screen, Sonoff or IT already sells screens, which is called the Nextion screens. And basically they have integrated that into a 2-gang switch. So the concept is new, but the parts itself are existing. Therefore, I'm quite confident in Sonoff's ability to execute this Kickstarter well. So I would think this is probably has lesser risk than probably some of the other, let's say, models or other Kickstarter projects. And quite a few pledges have closed already and sold, but there are a few things here that are still open. And as you can see, it says that with the Kickstarter you can get this unit for 54 US, but later on it's going to retail around 75 US. So that could be something to consider. And of course, probably again timeline, because I have no idea when the final product is going to get released. And instead of going through the whole Kickstarter page, actually I want to show you the main things of this screen and how I understand how this screen could be used best. Probably the best way to summarize it is this is designed to be a room controller. So the fact that they have integrated 2 light switches means that it is mostly designed to replace your light switch, which probably next to the door in your room, and add the additional functionality of controlling the temperature in that room, and also to control 8 other devices that are either in the room or scenes that are going to apply for your entire house. So don't expect this unit to be like a central hub where you can control all your devices and it's going to give you some graphs and everything, because pretty much what you can see here is this is what you get. So you have these screens, you have these functionalities, you can't create any additional scenes, or for example in the main screen you don't have any other features that you can control. It's just basically showing you some data. So in that respect, it is not like a like a central touch panel which allows you to control your entire house. As I said, this is more like a room controller. But I think even though Sonoff decided to sort of limit this functionality to what you see in the screen, they managed to execute it quite well, and the whole product seems to be working quite nicely. With many screen products, usually have the issues that the screen could be lagging, the touch controls are not good enough. But I think in this product, it actually works quite well. So when you touch this screen and when you swipe to the next screen, it responds very quickly. There is no stuttering on the screen. Everything updates quickly. I mean, as you can see, it's not like very, very fancy. There are no screen animations, which probably makes this unit also quite fast. But if you know Sonoff products, and especially these Next-Xeon screens, you probably understand why it is working the way it is. Therefore, I think that the whole design and the execution is actually very, very good. And since we are talking about the design and execution, let me just cover the the main physical features of this device. So as I said, you have a 3.5-inch touch screen. Display with a glass front. You have 2 buttons, and this time these are not touch switches but actual physical buttons. There is not a great deal of travel, so probably behind them there is a micro switch, but yeah, this is what you get. And this is in a gray bezel, which is plastic, but if I turn the unit around, you can see that the back is metal. And you have the similar type of contacts that you had for, let's say, a TX or a T1 line of switches. So there is a neutral wire. So definitely you have to have neutral in your switch box to install this. And you have a live in, which I have connected. So that is my black wire. And you have, for the 2 outputs, you have live out 1 and live out 2. So as I said, it's very similar to a TX switch. On the bottom side, we also find a port. That's the temperature sensor. This is how it's going to sense the room temperature. And the rest of the construction again follows the usual switch type. So you have these latches up here that you can unclip, and then you can remove the entire front cover, and that gives you access to these screw holes. And this is how you can mount it on the wall or against the socket that you have in the wall. And I think that would be pretty much it about the physical aesthetics. And I think what we can do now is we can focus on the various screens that you have. And when I go through these screens, I'm just going to also give you the functionality that you get with this device. So let me bring up the application as well. I don't want to talk too much about the pairing because it acts like any other device. Probably the only slight difference is that it also has Bluetooth. So when you want to pair the device, you click on the plus button and you select the Bluetooth pairing option. But then the rest of the process is pretty much like any other device. And once you edit, you get this new device icon, which for me it says HMR wall switch. And that's the main interface that you get with this device. So on the front screen, you see the weather forecast. So it shows you the current temperature and the weather icon. And you also get a range of minimum and maximum temperature. You get the clock and the month and the day of the week. And also you get the temperature of the room. And there is certain customizability to this screen. So if I go into the application and I go to the main screen, then I can see that I am able to control the unit, so I can change the Celsius to Fahrenheit displayed, and as you can see, the weather and also the current temperature changes. And that's the only thing I can set about the content that I displayed on the screen. So you can change the temperature value, but for example, you can't change the time unit or the date unit. So for US users, that's always going to show you 24-hour display, and also the date is going to be the month/day sort of European format. So this is November, the 21st of November. So you can't change those at the moment, but maybe could be that coming in the future. And probably you have also noticed that there is a timeout on this display. So after a certain amount of time, the display changes to a low power mode. And by the way, I can change these display settings here. So if I swipe from the top, I can select the top brightness, and I can also select the timeout, so 1, 2, 5, and 10 minutes. So that's the time after these many minutes the screen is going to dim. But you can also make some additional configuration in the app. So if I select screen settings, I have two options. One is the location, so this is where you select the location for the weather forecast, and you also have this energy saving mode. So you would use this energy saving mode if you want the display to completely shut off when it's not used. So normally it just dims, and then there is a set minimum brightness that the device sets, but this could be still a little bit too much in, let's say, in a bedroom. And so if you are installing in a bedroom, you can enable the energy saving mode, and that would completely switch off the screen after the timeout period. And you can even specify that energy saving period, let's say, is from 9 p.m. to 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. 6 a.m. So it only works during the night time. And if I do that, what we will notice is that the screen is going to going to turn off completely. So it's not going to disturb you if you have it in the bedroom. So this is what you get on the main screen, and of course the current temperature display, which will get used when we get to the thermostat screen. And probably this is what we can do next. So if I swipe left, I can get to the thermostat screen. And by the way, let me go back on the application as well. So here you can control the thermostat. So you can use the slider to change the set temperature. You can also use this button to set the turn the thermostat on or off. And you have one more button which allows you to change to a manual mode or a program mode. And if I change to the thermostat view on the app screen as well, you can see that I have access to the same controls here. So big on-off button, temperature changes, and a manual and an automatic mode. And in order to use this thermostat function, we actually need to configure it. So here on this screen, I click on the three dots on the top, and we can see that we can configure two things. So first of all, whether this thermostat is actually in a heating mode or in a cooling mode. So this is the device type. And then you can also configure the action device. So what you can basically do here is you configure which device the NSPanel should activate in order to turn on heating or cooling. So you can select one of the HMI outputs, either channel 1 or channel 2, or you can select any other Sonoff device. Well, I think any other Sonoff device probably means that any other Wi-Fi Sonoff device, because I'm not seeing any of my Zigbee devices here. So I selected my Sonoff Basic Release 2. So what is happening now is, oh, by the way, you can see that the screen has turned completely off. So let me just go back and turn off the energy saving mode for the purpose of this video. Okay. So going back to the thermostat, so what is happening now is, because I set the thermostat into heating mode, if I crank up the heating, I think it was measuring 28 in the room, and if I turn it all the way to 31, now I need, well, the room temperature is colder than the set temperature, so the heating must turn on. You can see there is a heating icon that came on, and it actually turned on the Sonoff Basic 2. And if I turn the heating down, if I turn the set temperature below the room temperature, now it turns off my Sonoff. So it works together with another Sonoff device in order to control heating. I'm saying this because the built-in relay for the two outputs are rated for 2 amps, so you won't be able to connect any decent heating device, let's say like a fan heater or an oil heater to this one, because 2 amps is just not enough. So I think to be on the safer side, you should use another Sonoff device. Not to mention that you are using one of the light outputs if you do that, if you want to use one of the internal outputs. And of course, if you're turning into cooling mode, then it's going to work the other way around. So if the set temperature is lower than the room temperature, that's when the device is going to turn on. I think it's straight enough. And if I turn into the program mode, then, or the auto mode, in the application you can set a set temperature curve that you want the device to maintain. So I created a very simple schedule here. So from midnight to 7 a.m. I want 19 degrees, from 7 to 8:30 I want 22, and for the rest of the day I want 20 degrees. And here, when you have the automatic mode, you can't change the temperature. Of course, it's going to use the schedule which is built in here. And you can create more items for the schedules. And as you can see, you can set the hour and the minute of the day, and you can even create which day of the week it should apply to. So you can easily create weekday and weekend schedules separately. And one last note about the temperature setting and how the the integration with the other Sonoff device work. So this works just like how you would set up an automation in the EV-Link app. So the communication between the NSPanel and the device, which is controlling, let's say, your furnace or your heater, is done via cloud. So if you don't have working and active internet connection, then basically this thermostat will not be able to talk to the other device. So just keep this in mind. It's, as I said, it works just like any other scene in Sonoff. And I have one last comment about the temperature settings, which is actually related to the temperature sensor which is inside the unit. As you can see, it is measuring 30 degrees, and it's definitely not 30 degrees in the room. So what I noticed that it's showing at least 3 or 4 degrees above the actual ambient temperature. It is showing a little bit more, but I have my laptop here and the fan is just pushing air this way, so that's probably heating up the device. I'm not really sure if this is more it's a calibration issue with the the sensor, or it is maybe some residual heat from the devices inside, but Sonoff is aware of that, so they are working on the problem. I think worst case scenario, maybe they are going to include a feature in the settings so you can have an offset. And as far as I could tell, based on how long I use this device, this temperature offset appears to be like a fixed value. So I don't think it is much dependent on how much you are using the device or whether the screen is on and off. And now, since we talked about the thermostat function, let's talk about the two outputs before we come to the last screen. So I already talked about the main screen or the this main screen, and probably you have also seen that when I operate the two switches, there are these two light bars at the bottom, so that gives you a feedback of the the current state of the switches. And of course you have the same switches on the phone screen as well. And for these switches you have the usual functions that we got used to for most of other Sonoff devices. One is the schedule, the timer, and the loop timer, and they work exactly the same way. So the loop timer, you can do like on-off cycles. With a timer, you can create a manual timer. So let's say you turn on the light and you want, that you want the light to automatically turn off after half an hour. So this is a one-time sleep functionality. And you also have the schedules. So these are the things like I want this light to always turn on 6 p.m. and turn off like 11 p.m. or something like that. You can set a repeat which day of the week. So nothing new here. And if I go into the settings, let's have a look at how you can configure these outputs. First of all, we have power on state, so you can configure whether these outputs should be on and off or return to the last state when the device gets powered on. You also have the inching setting, so if you want one of the lights to automatically turn off every time you turn it on, let's say after 10 minutes, my light here should turn off, then you enable the inching setting. I don't want to do that. And you also have the interlock functionality, which I think probably is going to get used less in 2-gang switches, unless you want to replace your blind controller with the NSPanel, because then you can enable the interlock and it can be used as a blind controller. So of course your blind either goes up or down and you want to control it using an interlock. And finally, let's talk about the last screen, which is the widget screen. And in order to use this, first you have to go into the settings, because there is a separate option here. As you can see here, it says widgets. And what you can do here is you can select 8 of your other Sonoff devices that you want to appear over here. So this is like a shortcut for 8 Sonoff devices. I said 8 Sonoff devices. That's not entirely true, because again here you can't select Zigbee devices. Maybe this is something which is only a limitation now and this will be enabled in the future, I'm not sure about, but all the devices that I can select are just regular Wi-Fi devices. But there is actually one additional feature, is that I can also select a tap to run automation. So if you see this quick watering here, which is the icon, that's the icon. This is actually a tap to run automation. So if I go out and if I go to the scenes, you see that I have 3 tap to run automations. Quick watering is one of them. So when you create an automation and in the trigger you select tap to perform, that's the manual integration or tap to run integration. And with this, you can actually control more than 8 devices with the NSPanel. Because let's say you can create a scene, a manual scene, which says, leaving home or turn off all the lights. And you can include that in the NSPanel in your room and maybe the NSPanel which is next to your main door. So when you go to sleep or when you go, leave the house, you tap that and it's going to turn off all your lights. I think this is a very good feature that they have included these automations. By the way, let me go back. But other than that, you can select, as I said, 8 devices. You just select them here. You can also rearrange them. But the one really nice feature about them is, how you can control them. So the tap to or the manual scenes are, fairly straightforward. You click them. You also have some devices that are single channel, like the POW, or I have a 1-gang touch. And when you just click them, they turn on, or when they are off, when they are on, you click them again and they turn off. So it is very simple to control them. And sometimes you have devices which has multiple channels. So let's say 4CH or 4CH Pro, or maybe like a 2-gang or a 3-gang TX or T1 switch. And when you click that, you get an additional screen and you can control the individual outputs. And these are actually live tiles. So if I have, for example, this touch, I think this touch is going to turn off automatically after a minute or so. And then you will see the status changing here as well. So it is definitely updates based on the the physical state of the device. There is one thing which I can't click here just because this device is not online at the moment. So it actually shows you in a slightly different color, but I don't think that's going to come through in the recording. And finally, if you have a device, for example, this LED strip, so this is an Sonoff L1 light. This is why I have it on the view. Then you actually have the rich controls that corresponds to this device. So as you can see, you have a control to change the brightness. I can lower it, I can increase it, I can change the color. So all the features that you need to control this device is actually included in the widget. By the way, the screen in the recording looks a little bit washed out, but this is definitely not like this in real life. So I can see, you know, a perfect color bar here or a color circle here, but it is really difficult for me to give good lighting and also not to reflect in this screen back into the camera. And if, let's say, if you have a Wi-Fi bulb from Sonoff where you can control the color temperature, then of course instead of the color wheel you have a slider for the color temperature and you have a slider for the brightness. So that's quite nice because you can, you know, control every aspect of any of your Sonoff devices from the NSPanel. And by the way, which I haven't mentioned when I talked about the video, is there is no default screen on this unit. So if you leave this unit in this screen, for example, it's never going to go back to the main screen. So if you are installing this NSPanel in a room where you don't care too much about the weather or the you know, the room temperature, you can just leave it on this screen, and you just have to walk up to this and then, you know, just click and quickly operate your lights or, you know, your other devices from here. So it is very easy to do. And of course, with a, let's say, an L1 light, I mean, you have to do clicks to get into the screen and click there to actually turn it off. There is no motion sensor on the screen, so if the screen goes into standby mode or a low power mode, you just have to touch it and it wakes up immediately. And in fact, it will execute the function and then, of course, wake up and increase the brightness. So if you know where to click, or if it's just in a dim mode, you can probably still find the button that you need to press. So these were all the features that are available on the NSPanel screen. And as I was reviewing these various screens, I think I've already gone through the application options as well, or the, you know, the mobile screen view as well. I mean, besides what we have already mentioned or where we have already covered, you have options to rename the device and the different channels as well. You can, you know, upgrade the version. You can do the usual change location sharing and then, you know, create a group. And of course you have the logs that shows you what who has changed the physical outputs. That's the only thing that the log shows. And when it comes to automation, most of the features are going to be similar to a 2-gang switch. So if I look at the actions that this device supports, I can create an action on the channel, so on and off, whether the, you know, either this button or this button got turned on or turned off. But I can also create a trigger on the temperature as well. But since it has the built-in thermostat functionality, I don't think that this would get used a lot, because most probably whatever you want to do here, you can do it on the thermostat screen. And if I go back and if I want to create an action, so smart device and wall, as you can see, you can only create an action on the 2 physical switches or the 2 outputs. So as I said, it works pretty much just like a 2-gang switch. I also want to add a few words about integration, or let's say future integration for this product. Just like any of the Sonoff devices, it integrates with voice assistant. I don't have Alexa, I only have a Google Home. So if I go into my Google Home app, what I'm going to notice is that I have 3 devices that are all related to the 2 switches. So I can turn off the both of the outputs on and off, or you can turn them on and off individually. So the Google Home integration only covers the 2 outputs. It doesn't know anything about the temperature or the thermostat functionality. So it doesn't appear as a thermostat within the Google Home app. And I would assume that it works pretty much the same in Alexa as well. So they pretty much appear as a 2-gang switch and not include any other functionality. And even though I haven't used the Sonoff integration app for Home Assistant, I have seen it in other videos that's being tested, and even the Home Assistant integration only includes the 2 switches. So you can't do anything with the temperature, you can't query the temperature or what else is this configured on the screen, you just have the 2 outputs. I think probably one interesting question that many of us will ask, if there would be a custom firmware available for this unit in the future. I think this is certainly possible, because we have seen how others have, you know, created custom firmware for the Sonoff. I haven't taken this unit apart, but I have seen some videos where the unit has been taken apart and I could see the usual connections for uploading new firmware to the device. So I think that would be certainly possible. The one big difference of this unit as opposed to most of the other Sonoff units is that this uses an ESP32 chip instead of an ESP8266. But I think the most common environments, for example, Tasmota, works on ESP32. And there is actually one more interesting thing which I found on the Kickstarter page. Let me bring back the Kickstarter. So if I go onto the updates, Sonoff has actually published some of the technical details about this panel. So actually they published some of the wiring, how the Nextion screen is connected to the ESP32. So that's probably going to help the guys who are thinking about coming up with an alternative firmware for this unit. I'm not really sure how much you know about this Nextion display. I looked at it a couple of years ago when I first stumbled upon it. And I have to say the screen works pretty much like how most of the HMI screens work, the industrial HMI screens, where you have a separate application where you can design the screens. Like I want this screen, which, with these text fields and these widgets and the picture in the background. And then you upload all these screen definition to the memory of the screen itself. So the screen has a controller chip and probably some firmware running on it. And then the microcontroller sends simple commands to the screen like go to this screen, display 22:36 on the the text box 1, which you define to be here with this specific font and font size, and basically just sending update commands to the display, like display this information, display that information, go to this screen, go to that screen, and of course this screen is going to send basic information back to the controller, like the different gestures that it detects or where you have clicked on the screen, like you clicked on the second button in the second row, and then of course the microcontroller would know which device that is. I'm saying this because that determines how much you can do with this screen. You can't make certain changes, so all the screens remain pretty much fixed. You have to design them up front. So for example, you won't be able to create a graph on this screen. You can't, touch on the temperature and it's going to show you a small graph of let's say your room temperature in the last 24 hours. So the way this Nextion screen is built is probably just not going to be possible. But still, that opens up a lot of different possibilities, how you can create like custom screens with custom controls, with a custom firmware that you probably would be able to control from Home Assistant. So I think there is going to be a lot of interesting future for this once we have a custom firmware available, which is, let's say, Home Assistant friendly, because we have seen several displays for Home Assistant, and this could be a nice addition. And the fact that it has a switch built in, or 2 switches built in, I think it makes it ideal for a room controller where you don't want to have an additional space next to your light switches. You can just replace your light switches with these. I think this pretty much concludes my review of this Sonoff NSPanel. This video is probably long enough already, but I wanted to convey all this information to you. Everything that I learned by testing and playing around with this unit, and I also had a couple of questions to Sonoff, which they answered in a couple of days, so that was really nice from them. And I wanted to get this video out in such a detail so you can make an informed decision whether this is a device that you want to use, whether this is something worth for you to jump into the Kickstarter before it gets released to, let's say, the main circulation and the usual sales channels. So if you are interested in this unit, I'm going to leave a link to the Kickstarter in the video description below. But I think that will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.